My name is Daniel Torres, and I've been driving trucks across the United States and Canada for over 20 years. My life on the road has been a mix of routine, long hours of solitude, and occasional interesting encounters with other drivers at rest stops. I have never considered myself superstitious, and although I have heard many strange stories from other truckers, I've always taken them with a grain of salt. It was a summer night when I received an assignment to haul a load from Texas to Ontario, Canada. The trip would be long and lonely, but I was already used to such journeys. The truck was loaded with agricultural machinery, and the company wanted it delivered within a week. I left Houston with a full tank and the thermometer showing 95 degrees Fahrenheit. The first part of the trip went smoothly. Traffic was light, and the roads, though long and monotonous, were in good condition. I passed through Dallas and then Oklahoma City without any issues. I stopped to rest at a service area near Wichita, Kansas, and allowed myself a quick break before continuing. 3 days had passed since I left Houston. I was driving on the desolate highway that runs through North Dakota, a region where civilization seems to have forgotten its existence. Night fell quickly, wrapping the landscape in a deep, almost tangible darkness. There was barely any traffic, and the only sound breaking the silence was the constant purr of the truck's engine. It was then that I noticed something unusual in the sky. At first I thought they were stars, but soon I realized they were too large and bright to be stars. There were 3 lights forming a triangle, moving in sync. My first reaction was to think it was some sort of military aircraft, but something about their movements made me doubt. The lights were slowly approaching, as if they were observing my truck. I decided to stop at the next rest area to get a better look at them. I found a small deserted stop and turned off the engine. I got out of the truck and looked up at the sky. The lights were still there, hanging in the air, making no noise. Suddenly, one of the lights descended quickly and disappeared behind a nearby hill. The other 2 lights remained stationary, as if they were waiting. I returned to the truck, trying to rationalize what I had just seen. Maybe it was just a helicopter or a drone, I kept telling myself. But deep down, I knew something was off. I started the engine and continued on my way, hoping to leave that disturbing experience behind. I had not driven more than 15 minutes when I felt a strong jolt at the back of the truck. The vehicle shook violently, and I had to struggle to maintain control. I thought I had hit an animal or a pothole, so I slowed down and pulled over to check. With a flashlight in hand, I walked around the truck and examined the rear. There were no signs of any visible impact. Everything seemed to be in order. But as I was about to get back into the cab, I heard a noise behind me. I turned quickly and saw a dark figure standing, watching me from a distance. My eyes struggled to adjust to the darkness, but the figure did not move or make any noise. I stood there, paralyzed for a moment, my heart pounding in my chest. Then, the figure vanished into the darkness as silently as it had appeared. Without wasting any more time, I ran back to the truck and locked the doors. I sped away from that place as fast as I could, without looking back. With my pulse still racing, I continued my journey through the dark roads of North Dakota. I tried to focus on driving, but I couldn't get the image of that dark figure out of my head. What had it been? A vagrant? An animal? None of those explanations seemed convincing. The road was completely deserted, and the monotony of the landscape only increased my anxiety. I decided to turn on the radio to distract myself. I tuned to random stations, but only found static and strange music I had never heard before. Finally, I found a station broadcasting local news and tried to concentrate on that. Then, it happened again. I saw in the rearview mirror how the lights in the sky reappeared, this time closer. My heart raced, and I felt a cold sweat run down my back. The lights seemed to be following me, maintaining a constant distance. I tried to accelerate, but no matter how fast I went, the lights were always there, floating in the distance. I decided I needed help. I desperately looked for a sign of life, some indication that I was not alone on that endless road. Finally, I saw a sign for a truck stop 5 miles ahead. I sped toward it, hoping to find someone who could offer me an explanation. I arrived at the truck stop and parked next to 2 other trucks. I got out of the vehicle and headed to the diner, which was still open. Inside, I found a couple of truckers having coffee and chatting. I approached them and told them what I had seen. To my surprise, they did not laugh or treat me like I was crazy. Instead, one of them, an older man with a gray beard, nodded slowly. "You saw the lights, didn't you?" he said quietly. "You're not the first, and you won't be the last." He explained that those lights had been seen by several truckers over the years. Some said they were UFOs, others believed they were secret military experiments. No one knew for sure what they were, but everyone agreed it was best not to draw too much attention. After listening to their stories, I decided it was best to follow their advice. I finished my coffee, thanked the truckers for their words, and returned to the truck. I was determined to complete my delivery and get out of that state as quickly as possible. The following days passed without incident. The lights did not reappear, and the figure in the darkness seemed like a distant memory. Finally, I reached Ontario and made the delivery. I felt an enormous sense of relief leaving that trip behind. Now, every time I drive on a lonely road at night, I can't help but look up at the sky, expecting to see those lights again. Although I have never had a similar experience since, the memory of those days in North Dakota stays with me always. I don't know what those lights were or who the figure I saw in the darkness was, but I know there are things in this world we cannot explain, and sometimes it's best not to seek answers. I just hope I never encounter the unknown on my journeys again. The least expected day. I always believed that everything in the paranormal world had already been written. Witchcraft, ghostly apparitions, demonic possessions, even the manifestations of the Nameless One. But I was wrong. I met a newlywed couple who, instead of celebrating their new step with happiness, became victims of an encounter one night that surpassed anything I had ever known. I didn't see anything myself. I wasn't a direct witness to the event, but I can firmly testify to the aftermath of that macabre, brutal, and grotesque experience which ruined their lives forever. As for me, I'll only tell you that my name is Mario. I'm from Mexico, and I'm 58 years old. The protagonist of this story, or rather the only one still with us today, allowed me to share what they endured with one condition: not to reveal their real names or too many details of the events, especially not their location. And that's more than understandable, especially out of respect, as I can sincerely assure you that you've never heard anything like what you'll learn tonight. At least, that's the case for me. Having clarified this, I will now recount what happened back in 1992. We knew each other for as long as I can remember. We were born in the same town, and since we went to school together, I can also say we practically grew up together. Jose, who I will call by a fictitious name, became my best friend. Likewise, I'll refer to the second protagonist as Paula. She not only grew up with us, but became Jose's girlfriend since our teenage years. Over the years, they consolidated their relationship by getting married. They were still young. He was 26 and she was 24. I shed tears when I remember the things they used to tell me, the plans and dreams they wanted to achieve, which were snatched from their hands by evil on the least expected day. Of course, I was telling my dad about it these past days, and he agreed. So the car is yours for a few days. The only thing he asked is that you take good care of it. However, I have a concern. Are you sure you want to go to that city? I know the honeymoon should be magical and unforgettable, but why go so far? There are so many tourist spots in neighboring cities that will amaze you. I don't know, just my opinion. But of course, you two go wherever you want. I just keep thinking that the city you chose is much bigger, and since we don't know it, I think it would be better to go to one we've already visited. I told Jose that afternoon when he asked if my dad had decided to lend them his car. "Don't worry, my friend, we'll be fine. On one hand, unfamiliar places give this kind of event that special touch. Don't forget, it's our honeymoon. We'll spend our first night as a legitimate couple there," he replied, reassuring me. A few days later, the wedding took place. The ceremony in the church, the reception at the hall, the guests who accompanied the newlyweds. Everything was perfect. That same night, they got into the car and said their goodbyes. I hugged them both again, congratulating them, wishing them the best, unaware that they were heading straight to their own hell. According to Jose, the journey went smoothly. They arrived at their destination around midday and checked into their pre-booked hotel room. After resting, they went out to explore the city center, returning to the hotel at night to continue resting, as they had plans to visit a nearby small, beautiful rural town the following day. By midday, they were there. The only unpleasant part was the drive through the dirt road leading to the town, surrounded by wilderness and silence, giving it a somewhat eerie atmosphere. The plan was to stay there for the day, rest in a rental apartment, and head to another town the next morning. That evening, they looked for a bar to unwind for a few hours, have dinner, and finally head to bed. It was in that very place where the unexpected happened, and perhaps that's where it all began. Jose told me the bar, though modest, had a pleasant atmosphere. There were other people enjoying drinks, but it was a particular small group of 5 visibly intoxicated men that stood out. At first, they were having fun without causing trouble. The problem began when Paula got up to go to the bathroom. Jose stayed at the table, unconcerned, until minutes later when he heard her shout his name. Looking up, he saw her, returning, but being held by one of the men from the group, who was disrespectfully trying to hug her. As you might imagine, Jose lost it, quickly running to free her, which led to a fight. Thank God it was brief. While Jose was fighting the man, the bar owner and employees immediately intervened, preventing the situation from escalating. The men seemed ready to kill Jose, advancing towards him with knives in their hands. The altercation ended with my friends heading to the apartment, and the drunkards still in the bar, arguing with the staff. Paula was crying, and Jose was still furious about what had happened. An hour later, when they thought it was all over, the group of troublemakers, led by the man who started it, showed up outside the apartment, shouting for Jose to come out and continue the fight. The apartment owners called the local police, who arrested the group, or so Jose thought. Half an hour later, they began preparing to leave the town immediately. Soon after, they were driving along the road, trying to escape the nightmare, both submerged in a sea of desolation and frustration. But as often happens, evil didn't stop its pursuit of causing harm and pain. Just a few kilometers away, the true horror of this story unfolded. They started hearing strange noises coming from the woods alongside the road. Jose was immediately reminded of the same feeling he had while driving along the dirt road out of town. A chill ran down his spine as he wondered if they were being followed. A grim realization shattered any remaining hope of enjoying their honeymoon. 2 armed men were waiting for them in the middle of the road, their faces covered by masks, foreshadowing their vile intentions. Unfortunately, Jose couldn't avoid them as they were pointing guns at him, so he pulled over to the side. In the blink of an eye, other men appeared from the woods, identical in appearance, and threatened my friend, forcing him out of the car, but not Paula. Jose fought as much as he could. Though he wasn't shot, the beating he received left him unconscious. He woke up tied up in the middle of the woods, surrounded by those men. But what shocked him most was another presence. A monstrous creature stood a few meters away, a huge, mutant dog-like figure with a human face, specifically that of an old man. Its black fur gleamed under the moonlight, and its heavy paws, armed with claws, sank into the ground as it slowly approached Jose. When it stopped nearby, as if in a sick illusion, Jose watched the beast begin to rise on its hind legs. The word Nahual flashed in his mind, and nothing could contradict his thought when the creature, unsatisfied with the terror it had already caused, took it beyond imagination. "We hate outsiders here." The hoarse voice of the Nahual chilled Jose's soul. He tried to stand and run, but couldn't. His body was too broken to allow it. The criminals accompanying the creature rushed to strike him again. Vulnerable and defenseless, Jose dared to ask the Nahual what it wanted, while coughing up blood that stained the ground, where he collapsed once again. "We don't care about you. We've already got what we wanted." That was the last thing he heard before being struck unconscious once more, though not before realizing that Paula wasn't there, and that several men he had seen earlier were missing. The same image of his beloved froze his senses when he woke up. Summoning all his strength, he searched for the road where the car and Paula had been left. He doesn't remember how long it took, but when he found it, he felt his life slipping away. Paula lay unconscious on the ground beside the car, her face bloodied, her clothes torn. No one else was around. They were exposed, their lives shattered on that dark road, with the moon as the only witness to the abrupt end of their dreams and goals, which they would now never fulfill. Only Jose and my family heard this story from him. I still remember when he told it, his body trembling, his voice breaking, his face soaked with tears. It was the crude proof that what they had lived through was undeniably real. Paula never recovered. Unable to bear the terror and panic she lived with, she took her own life months later. As I mentioned at the beginning, I omitted several details, but if the ones I included are enough for you to find this story terrifying, imagine how you'd feel if I told you everything. A monster, no, a cursed demon, is what took their dreams, goals, and plans, and yet many questions remain unanswered. Was there more than one Nahual? Because they swear several were following them. Who were those two men waiting for them? It seems it was an ambush, and if so, why? How did they know Jose and Paula would pass through there? Was it random? We don't think so, given that the creature told Jose we already got what we wanted, clearly referring to Paula, who was left at the mercy of the other men. She was brutally assaulted, but they left her alive, knowing she could have recognized them. Or maybe their intention was always to let her continue living in agony, knowing that she would eventually end it herself. And then there's Jose. His survival was nothing but a way to keep torturing him. To this day, there are many reports of missing people on that stretch of road. Could it be the same criminals? And if that's the case, it chills me to think that the townspeople could be involved, something we may never know. And to finish, were those drunkards from the bar the same men who, joined by others, chased them down until they caught them? Why didn't they take advantage of that dirt path to catch them before reaching the road, where there were more chances of being discovered committing such a heinous act? But without a doubt, considering everything previously mentioned, that old pervert was the damned Nahual that ruined both their lives. How cruel fate can be. No newlywed couple would ever think that while celebrating their honeymoon, a peculiar incident would prompt a group of scoundrels to mercilessly and shamelessly change their lives forever on the least expected day. Unexpected friends. It all began when I moved houses. I had lived with my parents for many years, and as my wife and I were expecting our third child, our home was becoming too small. My parents agreed to the move, though my mother was a bit sad at first because she would miss her grandchildren, my wife, and me. The new house wasn't far, just a few kilometers away, but my parents, who were older and still working, started visiting us less frequently. At first, they came 4 times a week, then only once a month. It was then that strange things began to happen. My name is Martin Ramirez. I'm from Cordoba, Argentina, and I work as a truck driver. It's a profession I learned from my father, who is now retired. I worked in the same company where he spent his entire career, and he was the first to be surprised when I began telling him what was happening to me. "Dad, you won't believe what happened on my last trip. I was at the company, ready to leave, when I suddenly smelled a very unusual floral perfume. I thought maybe a secretary had passed by, but I didn't see anyone. I didn't pay much attention to it, but when I tried to start the truck, the engine wouldn't turn over. Sebastian, the maintenance guy, checked the vehicle and found that the brakes were faulty. If the engine had started, I probably would have had an accident. My father was upset at first, but calmed down when he saw that, thanks to God, nothing serious had happened. However, on my next trip, something similar occurred. This time I was driving down a deserted road in the middle of the night. I smelled the flowers again and saw an elderly couple crossing the road in a deserted area. I braked to avoid hitting them and thought about offering them help. I got out of the truck, and just then, another truck coming from the opposite direction crossed a bridge that collapsed. The other driver died instantly. If I hadn't stopped for the elderly couple, it would have been me. My parents were incredulous when I told them this. My mother, in particular, looked at me in a strange way, as if she knew something I didn't. Strange things continued to happen. A few days later, I parked the truck to rest and make some coffee. An old car stopped in front of me, and 3 people got out: a pregnant woman and 2 men. We chatted for a while, and they asked me for coffee. While I was making the coffee, I heard their terrified screams. They ran to their car and left in a hurry. Later, I found out from the news that they were criminals who had robbed another traveler and were caught by the police shortly after fleeing from me. Something supernatural had saved me again. The events continued, always preceded by the smell of flowers. One day, a colleague, Jorge, told me he had seen me traveling with several different people, all with expressionless faces. I realized that these companions were spirits that I couldn't see. I went to talk to my mother, and she took me to her garden, where she had an altar dedicated to the souls in purgatory. She prayed to them every day for my protection. Since then, I have become devoted to the souls in purgatory, though I asked them not to show themselves to me. I learned that they can intercede for us, and my experience is proof of their power. The elderly couple who saved me from the bridge and the spirits who scared off the criminals were souls who came to my aid, thanks to my mother's prayers. I call them unexpected friends, though my mother prefers to call them friends from beyond. The strange experiences didn't end there. One day I was driving down a lonely road in the middle of the night. The sky was clear, but there was no moon, making the darkness more intense. Suddenly, the smell of flowers filled the cabin of my truck. I already knew what that aroma meant, so I started paying attention to anything unusual. In the distance, I saw a figure standing in the middle of the road. As I got closer, I saw a man in old-fashioned clothes, like from the early 20th century. He seemed disoriented and didn't move, so I braked sharply and got out of the truck. "Are you okay, sir?" I asked, but he didn't respond. He just looked at me with a vacant expression. As I tried to approach him, I felt a chill run down my spine. Then I saw another truck approaching quickly from the other side of the road. I didn't have time to react. The other truck passed right where I would have been if I hadn't braked. When I looked again, the man had disappeared. I got back into the truck and continued my journey, still trembling from what had just happened. That night, when I reached my destination, I called my mother and told her what had happened. She reminded me to always carry a blessed rosary and to keep praying to the souls in purgatory. Another terrifying experience happened a few weeks later. I was driving at night when I saw flashing lights in my rearview mirror. I thought it was the police, so I slowed down and pulled over. However, when the lights got closer, I realized there was no vehicle behind me. They were just lights floating in the air. Despite my fear, I stayed in the truck and watched as the lights moved around me, as if inspecting me. After a few minutes, they disappeared as quickly as they had appeared. Later, I learned that a fatal accident had occurred on that same road years ago, and that other drivers had seen the lights too. The most unsettling situation I experienced was when I picked up a hitchhiker. He was a young man who seemed lost and grateful for the ride. We chatted for a while, but I noticed his answers were vague and evasive. After a while, he fell silent and stared out the window. When I asked if he was okay, he didn't respond. When we reached his destination, I turned to say goodbye, but he was no longer in the seat. He had vanished without a trace. I felt a chill and searched the entire truck, but found no sign of him. When I told my mother, she said he might have been a restless soul seeking comfort. Since then, whenever I smell flowers, I know something unusual is going to happen. The souls in purgatory have become my guardians, protecting me from invisible dangers. I have learned not to fear them, but to thank them for their constant vigilance. Now, every time I go on a trip, I carry a small image of a saint and silently pray for protection and guidance. In summary, the souls in purgatory have played a crucial role in my life, saving me on more than one occasion. Their interventions have shown me that there are forces beyond our understanding that care for and protect us. I call them unexpected friends, though my mother prefers to call them friends from beyond.